All right, everyone, we know it's late, but we have something important to say. Obviously, this is the end of a two-year General Assembly, and I think, and I say this every year, but it's true, I think that this can really be summed up as the good, the bad, the ugly, and I'll say, and the uglier. There were so many things that we did this year that I think a lot of our constituents probably are not pleased with or not proud of, and certainly didn't want. I think there are some things that we did do really great, and of course, you know, we can kind of talk about those details, but then I think there are some things that we did that will fundamentally change how people in this state function, will fundamentally change how state government functions, and that is a real takeaway that, a real unfortunate takeaway. So today was a day. I think we had 26 conference committees, a General Assembly record, and I think that really speaks to a little bit about the legislative process, and, or lack thereof. But I'll just say this, it's been a long year. We've tried to work as hard as we can to make things affordable for Tennesseans, to address rising gas costs, grocery costs, housing costs, the cost of energy. We've tried to make it where children in our public schools can go to a well-resourced school where they can get a stellar public education. We've tried to protect those who are in our country, who have chosen our country as a place for them to reside. We have tried to create a Tennessee that speaks to Tennesseans and not unelected folks in Washington, D.C. We all voted against the state budget, which is really unusual. A lot of us take it very seriously that is a duty of ours that we must perform as members of the General Assembly. And it's simply because we could not feel good about saying mission was accomplished after voting for it, because we truly did not do anything to provide meaningful relief for those across this state who so desperately need it. As a matter of fact, we went so far as to almost double the amount of public dollars that go to private schools with little to no accountability, impacting communities that make almost $100,000 a year or more. Certainly not least among us, those that we as a government really should protect. I will say that there were some victories, particularly with our caucus, focusing on criminal justice reform, getting rid of outdated, long-standing policies to make it more difficult for ex-offenders to register to vote. We passed legislation that would take serious looks at the emerging technologies in our state. We passed legislation that would really try and get to the heart of a lot of the issues that teachers in our public schools are facing. But I will turn it over to some of my colleagues to kind of give a summation and their thoughts on this legislative session. But my key takeaway is, you know, we will have monumental change next year, a new speaker in the Senate, a new governor, a new administration, and there were some real opportunities to hit at the heart of what's ailing most Tennesseans, and that is the lack of affordability in this state. And unfortunately, I think we came up significantly short.
Thank you all for being here. As we close this legislative session, I want to speak plainly about what Tennesseans have seen. We are operating under a Republican supermajority that have the votes to pass legislation without Democrats. But that's not right. They have the right to do it, but it's not the responsible thing to do. Just because you can pass something without Democratic input does not mean you should. You don't get real sound policy. You get a one-sided look. This session, we've seen decisions that raise serious concerns about balance and respect for local communities, especially Shelby County. We've seen legislation targeting duly elected district attorney in Shelby County, regardless of the politics of people who voted for that person. The state has chosen, or the legislature, to interfere. People who have said for years they believe in local knows best, closest to the people, and went against their own values and taken over things that local should be doing. We've seen movement toward a takeover of Memphis-Shelby County Schools. And we even said before, we understand that there's some things that Shelby County needs. We should be about working with them and not taking them over. Even in our final days, we've been dealing with this legislation around taking over all the airports. Again, locals know best. And this has been a recurrent theme with this Republican supermajority. Where they don't have power, they try to seize your power. And you can see it playing out in the legislation that they're passing. I always like to talk about some of the great things we have done. We've passed some good legislation as Democrats, and I know people think, you're in the majority, you can't get anything done. But that's not true. We can get things done. We made the spiking of drinks a Class D felony. We added communication disorders to the 2021 Precious Cargo Act. We did a bill that allowed time off for people living, dealing with organ donations. Mm-hmm. We directed the Department of Health to test newborns for sickle cell, which is something very close to me. I have the trait. We enacted the Curbing Harmful AI Technology Act. We enacted the Representative Johnny Shaw Agriculture Innovation Education Initiative. We increased the minimum age to operate jet skis. We know one of our former members passed from an incident with an 11-year-old dealing with jet skis. And we also, as the senator said, help restore voting rights for people who have done everything we've asked them to do. And money was a barrier for the child support. We got rid of that this year. So now we have more people who want to be participants in the electoral process able to do just that. So I just want to highlight a few things that we've accomplished. I'll turn it over to Senator Yarbro.
Tennesseans from across the state sent their representatives and senators to Nashville for the last 4 months, and what do they have to show for it? And in the big picture, the answer is not very much. There were some good things done that the leader Camper just mentioned, but overall, this is a supermajority that was focused on trying to take over everything while solving next to nothing. This legislature for the last 4 months couldn't be bothered to do anything about rising unemployment, which is going up as of today in 87 of 95 counties. This legislature did, as far as I can tell, nothing about the rising prices that Tennesseans are facing at the gas pump, on their electric bills, for cars, for housing, for groceries, for health care if they can still afford health care. But here's what they did find time to do. They found time to take over 5 airports, the biggest school system in the state, the 2 largest utilities in the state. They found a way to ensure that there's going to be state policing in 6 cities across the state where about 25% of Tennesseans live. They preempted local governments on everything from sewage systems to shopping carts. We got mandates for every school in every city in every county across the state to post the 10 Commandments, to establish prayer time. We have mandates for all 95 sheriffs to participate in federal immigration enforcement without the dollars to actually make that possible. Agencies that used to be independent, that we worked for decades to keep independent because they are a public trust, like the lottery that deals with millions and millions of dollars, the college systems, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. This legislature has systematically dismantled that independence so that they're now either responsive to political pressure or can just have their decisions overridden altogether. This is a government that can't fix its own roads, run its own prison system without ending up in federal investigations, run a DCS system without ending up in audits and in litigation, but they're convinced that they can run everything else. And this is a tale as old as time. People who are in power really like that power, and they concentrate it and they entrench it. But when that happens, it never ends up in better schools for our families. It never ends up with better roads. It never ends in better jobs. It never ends in stronger communities. And that's the story of this legislature. It was so busy grabbing power on every different front that it ignored the real problems that Tennesseans across the state are facing. That's the simplest explanation of what this legislature has spent the last 4 months doing.
Well, I'll wrap up this evening. Thank y'all for sticking around. First of all, I just want to say how proud I am as the caucus chairman of the House Democratic Caucus, and my colleague, Senator London Lamar, could be here, and I know she would say the same, is how proud we are of our fellow leaders and our caucus members. You've all witnessed us fight a lot of fights this year to try to stand up for the families of Tennessee, and I couldn't be more proud of the people with whom I have the privilege of serving in the respective Democratic caucuses. Anything that was passed this year that's going to be harmful to Tennessee families, that Republicans introduced, that was handed them by Stephen Miller or some special interest or some corporation, they had to fight for every single inch. As Leader Camper said, we're outnumbered, we're in the superminority, but I think everyone will agree that we do our job speaking up for the people we represent, and I'm very proud of that. And these guys have to fight for every single inch that they get, and every win that they describe as a win is really a loss for Tennessee families. Now, I just want to turn back to those things that Senator Yarbro mentioned that Republicans probably called victories this year. None of those. When all of us decide to run for office, and when most of our colleagues across the aisle decide to run for office, I guarantee you that wasn't on the top 50 things that they wanted to accomplish as a public official. We all ran for elected office to improve people's quality of life. We ran to benefit our children, our communities, our neighborhoods, our cities, and benefit every citizen across the state of Tennessee. Build better roads, protect our public schools, build better schools, provide health care, accessible, affordable health care to folks. Just do the basic things that you think about when you dream about serving and having the privilege that we have to represent people in elected office, and it truly is a privilege. Those are the things that you would hope, and I think Tennesseans fairly expect us to do when we get into office. And I guarantee you, 7.5 million, 8 million Tennesseans out there, none of them are going, God, I wish they would take over my airport. God, I wish they would come in here and put troopers on our streets, or I wish they'd pass some more, legislation to try to strip a driver's license from somebody who's passed a test just because they can't converse in English sufficiently. That's not what people care about. People want us to solve their problems. We didn't do any of that. We didn't fill the potholes. We didn't build better roads. We didn't build better public schools. We didn't fully fund our public schools. We didn't provide cheaper health care. We didn't provide more accessible health care. We limited rights. And that's unfair. And that is a failure of state government. And I think you can put a bow tie, let's put a bow on Governor Bill Lee's 8 years in office and just go ahead and call it what it is. An utter and despicable failure. Nothing that has been done in the last 8 years is worth bragging about. His legacy will be blowing up our state budget and destroying public schools. That's it. That is it. And he should be ashamed of that, because serving in that office, like our offices, is a tremendous opportunity. You have incredible opportunity to benefit people and improve their quality of life in that office, as well as ours. I can only hope that the next governor who comes in is willing to work with us, work across the aisle, and actually focus on the issues that matter to Tennessee families. Because it is time to get this state back on track. It's time to do what we were elected to do, what we dreamed about doing when we got elected, and that is improving the quality of life of every Tennessee family for the benefit of Tennessee families. Because that's what matters, and that's why the House Democratic Caucus and the Senate Democratic Caucus are here. And I couldn't be more proud to be a part of it. Thank y'all. Any questions?
I asked Speaker Sexton about some of these same preemptive bills that y'all mentioned, specifically mandatory 287G, the airport takeover, local utility takeover. He said it was about following money that the state is investing and seeing how it's spent and having some control. Do you all, as representatives of these metro areas that are seemingly being targeted, see it as a partisan attack, and what is your recourse when this is happening?
Well, it's simply a power grab. The money that they're claiming that they're investing, I think the argument on the House floor was that they're using taxpayer dollars to fund these, airports. Well, the reality is that these airports and our cities are generating hundreds of millions of dollars for the state of Tennessee. And all they're doing is reinvesting a small fraction of that back into them and using that as an excuse to take more power. And, and the more that I've told several people this in recent days, they keep giving the Attorney General more power. They keep grabbing all this, usurping local control and consolidating it in, just for themselves. But I'd like to remind them, there's going to come a time where they built these big walls around their castle. Someday the time's going to come when they're on the other side of that wall. And they're going to regret every single thing that they're doing. Because if they like to talk about local control, they're acting in the exact opposite. The recourse is, we'll see what happens. But the whole financial argument doesn't make any sense. We're the ones generating the revenue. We are the moneymaker for the state of Tennessee. They're all living off of our communities. Memphis, Nashville, Knoxville, Chattanooga. We're the ones driving the economy of the state of Tennessee, and they just want to grab more power.
Wanted to pose the same question I asked in the last news conference about, it seems like transportation and infrastructure just continues to be a big issue for Tennessee. What's the solution in your mind of making sure that people aren't stuck in traffic or dealing with potholes and that kind of thing moving forward?
It ain't a tunnel.
Right, I mean, that would have been a great thing to work on this year, last year, the year before that, or at any point during this governor's administration. We have a structural hole in our road funding, and it's going to take people who are serious trying to fix it. It turns out what's not serious way to fix that is to start a brand new $1 million a year agency that services a company that's going to handle a few thousand cars that's owned by the world's richest man. I mean, this is like one of the more ridiculous pieces of legislation that's ever been passed up here. I mean, they created an entire agency that's entire purpose is to serve a private company. I mean, the railroads back in the day didn't get that kind of special treatment, and that's what's happening here. And so what it's going to take is going to take people who are serious about finding the new sources of revenue to ensure that you can build the roads, and to be serious about what kind of transit and roadway infrastructure is actually going to work.
I remember when we did the Improved Act, and the governor proposed initially 10 cents. He wanted to raise it 10 cents because, you know, we hadn't raised taxes on gas for like since the 80s. And so that number was flattening out, but everything else was going up. And at that time, he decided to go with the 6, so that was a compromise. But we was really trying to push him for indexing. Put that in there so as time go along, it kind of keeps up with inflation. We didn't do that. We have got to find a dedicated source for our roads. Gas tax is not enough because it's flat, and then you go back and try to increase it, people are not gonna have the courage to increase it anymore. That was the opportunity, we missed the opportunity. We pride ourselves in this state on saying, we pay as we go. No bonding. We have the best rating, AAA. We're proud of that. But we're so proud of it that we're not willing to maybe bond some of this stuff. The interest rate will be low, we can go in, we can do it. There's not enough courage here to do that, to be honest with you. And I will give Representative Hawk some credit here. He's tried to find ways, he's tried to find different dedicated sources, but it's never got any traction. So we do need to come up with some dedicated source to help with the backlog. I mean, it's like billions of dollars in backlog. 58 in backlog, and we hear from our constituents all the time about the roads. What are y'all gonna do for this road? What are you gonna do for this? So we can find a dedicated source of income, of revenue for that.
Any more questions?
I have a question for the Memphis folks. I'm curious what you guys would say to a young Memphian right now who's been keeping up with the news and sees that the state's coming in and taking over their school system, they're coming in, putting troops on the ground, literally. What kind of advice would you have for them?
Well, I'll say this, and I'm happy that you grounded your question in the student, right? Just to let the student know that they are doing the right thing. They are continuing to have growth, and they're meeting a lot of these different metrics that the state has asked them to do. Just because the state decided to intervene does not mean that their school district is a failure. It does not mean that they are failures. It does not mean their teachers are. It does not mean people in Memphis are failures, right? We have people who are up here fighting for you, trying our best in spite of being outnumbered to make sure that they have access to a great public education. And I would tell them, listen, you have people who are watching. We're watching this advisory board. We're watching the development of it. They are not by themselves. And I will remind them of the legacy of the people they come from. They come from a city that prospered because it was by a river, because of cotton, because of slavery. That they come from Robert R. Church, who saved Memphis. That they come from a rich legacy of people who fought back against oppression, from our sanitation workers to those who fought to be the first Black elected officials in different bodies. Tell them that we have been in dark times before, but this is not a time where we give up, where we in any way feel that we are not good enough, that we are a part of a problem when we really are the solution. I would tell them to keep their heads up and to know that Memphis is a great city. And if people don't understand that, that's their problem. Memphis has always mattered. And if people are just recognizing that, that's their problem. We proudly represent, myself and Leader Camper and Representative Parkinson, represent communities that have been counted out, that have been, counted as if they aren't going to, they don't matter, but they do. And I'll just tell them to keep their head up, keep moving forward, right? And at the end of the day, they are the future. And if they don't like something, they need to vote. And they need their peers to vote. Because whenever you look at elected office, when I got elected, I was 29. And, I'm 41 now. I'm 42. Oh my gosh, I'm 42
Just
now.
had birthday.
Had a birthday. Yeah, so just don't give up. Build on their rich history. Stay very much so grounded in the present and fight for a better future. Sorry, I went a long.
Of course, you guys have a lot of time off now, but coming back next session, what are you guys really going to focus on at the start of next year's General Assembly?
Well, I'll tell you, I think that everybody probably has a different answer. I would one say, unfortunately, we have no time off, no days off. We're just not in the legislature, but our constituents will have us in high demand. But honestly, I think that the same problems that our constituents are facing now, particularly around affordability, will remain. We will be dealing with a new, executive administration. So really trying to see what that particular administration will be about and how they're going to be willing to work with us. My first governor was Governor Haslam, and now Governor Lee, this will be my third one. And I find that we really create the best policy when we actually work together. So that's what I'm gonna be looking for. One, finding out ways to make life more affordable for folks in Tennessee. And then, of course, seeing how we can build a real collaborative relationship with this new executive that will be there.
So were you gonna go?
No, I was just, all I was gonna say is, like she said, we all have different answers, but they all deal with people's quality of life and addressing the issues that people are actually worried about, that their challenges they're facing on a daily basis. That's what we're gonna be focused on.
And at the Republican press conference, they, touted a lot of things that passed the session, like the voucher program expansion and Memphis schools and different things, but they really didn't bring up too much of the immigration bills that passed this session. What do you think that kind of says about what they're thinking right now?
Look, and here's the reality for us, is we know that when we're in this building that we're gonna lose to this majority that's focused on an agenda that's coming from this White House, but we know if we leave this building and go to not just the communities we represent, but rural communities, small towns, suburban communities, urban areas, wherever you go, this supermajority does not represent the people of Tennessee right now. And what we've got to do next year is to make sure it starts. Because the people of Tennessee do not want to redevote all of their resources to trying to enforce the sort of absurd and aggressive Trump agenda. Sure, do they want things to be safe and secure? Yes. But do they want us to focus on that as opposed to letting Washington handle what it's supposed to do? No. They want us to focus on how do we make schools better? How do we actually improve their lives? And I think that when we come back next year, we're going to be focused like a laser on trying to do just that. And really just trying to make sure that this legislature actually starts representing the people of Tennessee and their actual needs and what they want to see in the future.
Senator Yarbro, you spoke earlier on the Senate floor just briefly about how conference committees, there were many appointed, but few actually met, that some sort of papers were kind of handed around at the end of the session. Leader Camper, you also spoke about the Republican supermajority passing bills without even really consulting you all. Do you feel that you've witnessed over the course of this legislative session, as opposed to previous years, a more eroding of democracy?
I think the evidence sort of speaks for itself. We had more conference committees today than we've had on the last day of session any year in the last dozen years at least. Almost none of those conference committees actually met. What happened most of the time is that I don't even know if it was a member or staff people got together and wrote up what would be the conference committee report, and brought signed copies around for people to submit. And there was no meetings, no public discussion. But, I mean, just look at the history here. We've seen Tennessee has been a place that's expelled members from its body, that's closed its balcony to citizens, that's passed new laws to enable it to keep people out of the building. Yeah, I mean, like, we're obviously seeing a huge reduction in norms. And I think, frankly, you're seeing there's no commitment to just ensuring that we follow the law. The Constitution's turned into more of a speed bump than a set of rules we have to follow. And that's no way to run a government. And so, I mean, I think you're seeing sheer recklessness on that front.
I do feel that way. It's an erosion, because it's interesting you asked that question. I've been talking about, and I was speaking with respect to the budget. And I was hearkening earlier about Charles Sargent, Lita Fitchie, Gerald McCormick, and how these people have not experienced what bipartisanship looks like, and particularly around the budget. And I served on budget subcommittee for years and full finance. R or D, it didn't matter. If you were on that committee, you came together to put together a budget for the state of Tennessee. And we would get to go in and talk about our priorities, and they come in and talk about theirs. And we didn't always agree on what the priorities should be. But once the Democrats said, this is what we want, others can say, this is what we want, and we agree on that list of priorities, we fought as a House against the Senate to keep our priorities together. And we did. And I miss those times. I was talking about it today. You know, we don't always agree on a lot of stuff, but we were very careful to think about what impact is this going to have on the state? What impact is this going to have on people's lives? That was something that the budget committee used to actually do. And when we agreed, it didn't matter R or D. If you came before that committee and we knew that was not going to pass, you probably didn't even get a motion or a second, regardless of who you were. And people understood that. The members understood it, and the committee members understood it. So we collaborated more. We used to fight the senator line and trying to keep the House priorities together. So yeah, I do think it's an erosion of democracy. You know, I don't think our team haven't met with them since Patsy Hazelwood left. To be honest, you know, we would meet with her. It's a little different, but we did meet. So yeah, I think I'm seeing it more and more. And a lot of these members, they've never seen it. This is all they know, and they think that's the way. And so I'm trying to educate them all every chance I get.
All right, thank y'all.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.